Hey, and welcome to Dataclay podcast. This is our second episode. I'm Alan Barnwell, and I handle sales here at Dataclay. I'll be your co-host, but let me introduce your host for the podcast, our founder, CEO, and chief developer, Ari Stavchansky.
All right. Thank you, Alan. Thanks, everybody, for joining today. I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule. On this podcast episode, I'm happy to introduce Lloyd Hoffmeyer. He is the co-founder of Multiplied. It's a digital design and production studio based in Cape Town, South Africa. He is a creative technologist and a designer who heads a talented team supporting clients such as BMW, Anheuser-Busch, Doctors Without Borders, Investec, King Price, and a roster of other clients, all seeking to connect with their patrons in a personalized way. He's an early adopter of our templator software, and his team has automated production workflows to produce countless personalized communication campaigns, and over the years has graciously offered his insights to steer Dataclay's products. He and his team are cherished users, and we are happy to welcome him to this second episode. Lloyd, thank you so much for joining today. And as we delve into your work and how you've used our software to help your endeavors. So thank you.
Thanks, Ari. Good to be here. And yeah. Insights is a fancy word for, we had a lot of opinions as to how we wanted template to work in our scenario.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, always a pleasure, though, hearing yours because they're spot on and very relevant. So thank you. And I classify y'all as power users. So we're so happy that you're
old school.
Yeah, definitely old school. So thank you for sharing some of your work today. And I guess that's where I want to start is, can you just, stepping back, talk a little bit about, what kind of video content your studio produces, and if you can, I know that you've gathered some things. If you can share those pieces of content with us today.
Yeah, sure. So, we specialize in personalized and data-driven campaigns, mostly through agencies where our core competency of motion graphics are combined with dynamic sections, where we can add things like customer names or other data points, and creating unique pieces of media for them. An example, going to some of our previews is a campaign we did for a cycling race where every finisher got a video with their time and their details, congratulating them on the event. So this was one of our first big campaigns, and we produced 17,000 videos in a single day. So we learned so much about building a rig that could handle running AE in the cloud at that kind of scale. Mm-hmm. So much about data cleanliness as well, and a lot of the cyclist data that we got from the race company was either incomplete or inaccurate, which led to us having to build in learnings. Okay, how do we account for these kind of things when going into creative campaigns? And we've had different use cases and different scenarios, which has been quite exciting. So really the idea of what can you do with dynamic data points and the idea of data narratives. This particular example for a finance company monthly wrap up, how's the fund doing, what did the investment look like, and really the kind of the power of graphing and that combined with motion graphics really creates engaging pieces of media. And then, sports data is just super fun to play with, and this is something we did for the Rugby World Cup a couple of years ago, and
very nice.
Really that starting point of going, okay, what does an engaging piece of social media look like, and then pairing that with live data or up to the minute data gets really exciting when you start playing around with that. And then good old COVID a couple of years ago.
Man, what a time.
So, this was something where we worked with a health insurance company here, and they kind of track the data, and we created these as daily updated videos. And it was just really interesting having to learn I suppose, data visualization, really, to kind of package the story of what was happening with the stats, as far as recoveries were going, as far as cases. And there was really a lot to do, because you're thinking about motion graphics quite differently when you're building videos in this way. And then
yeah, I mean, and as I see these, by the way, these are beautiful designs, and you guys have a really strong grasp of typography, color, motion. I love y'all's work. It's just been really great to see how it's transformed over the years as you've kind of wrangled data in a way that creatives are what I would say are just now getting more familiar with it. I guess stepping back even before all of this stuff, before all of this content, what was the specific problem that your business faced at the very outset? Like, if you can recall back, I guess we started in 2014, and then by 2016, I think y'all were already full-fledged customers. What was that first customer about, or how can you talk about how you came to even learn about this notion of content automation?
So, I mean, yeah, that was, early days for us. I was still mostly freelancing, and a lot of my customers were social media customers. So I was producing podcast videos for them. As people released a new episode, I would package, social content for them. So it was naturally quite easy to fall behind. Social media is a very hungry beast. And that's where I really started flirting around with the concept of automation, just to help me keep up. So I was already pulling data from the podcast RSS feed, which updates as a new episode is released. And then Zapier would take that and put it in a Google Sheet for me. I just needed the building of the media to be easier. So, I kind of got as far as I could. I had a habit of browsing AE scripts each time I got a new project.
Yes, AE scripts.
And I almost used each new freelance gig as an excuse to get a new plugin or a new preset. I was like, this particular project, can pay for this plugin, and that's kind of how I built my library over time. So I came across your plugin first, your AE scripts, and then my curiosity was confirmed by listening to Fraser Davison mentioning it on a School of Motion podcast, that they were using Moshe's automated content. So that was really what allowed me to kind of take the plunge, and I started with a rig and really started playing around with, with the idea of connecting that Google Sheet to the template. And I was still, then just using the kind of time sculpting or layout sculpting feature, but then producing the media automatically. And then that progressed to going, okay, what does bot look like, and what does it look like to really step away from the screen? And as that RSS feed updates, it was still very, daisy chained Zapier to Google Sheets to then After Effects kind of processing that. So it was a lot of fun just understanding the process and connecting things together like that.
Yeah, I think the early days was a lot of just trying to convince end users, like, the conceptual model of thinking about data to bring into their design and their workflow. But I think y'all really captured that, or grasped that very quickly. So you've had all this experience, and you kind of had that spark to get started. But what about can you tell us about, now that you're working with clients on the reg, I would say, where does that customer data come from? Can you talk a little bit about just the separation between in your studio between gathering the data and working with the creatives, and how that data is prepared? And then finally, I know this is a 3-part question, but how do you talk to your clients about and assure them about the security of that data? Can you just briefly talk a little bit about those things?
Yeah, it's all fine and good doing data-driven creative, but data is the tricky part of that. We've had to clone our system onto clients' ecosystems. In some occasions, we've had to set up servers in specific territories for like legal data reasons. So there's always hoops to jump through. Added to the fact that many clients don't have good unified, clean data for us to even work with. And, even some of the big players, we just get a spreadsheet from them, and, we have to work with that. So in terms of security, we OWASP certified. So we've kind of gone through the process of tightening all those nuts and bolts, and we've gone through some vigorous, rigorous pen testing. But we're very much the creative guys. We're not data specialists in any way. So, once a client sends us data, it goes straight into automation. We don't process it otherwise. But, the data part of data-driven media has really changed the way we use AE. And I've needed to learn expressions to build those templates I can adjust on the fly. And, an example is not knowing what number is going to go into a particular graph means you can't animate it with static keyframes. So a lot of the builds that use dynamic data, it's all done through expressions. And then countless hours of that, is spent on Stack Overflow, sifting through expression questions. And many of our problems were solved by one of Dan Ebbitz's answers, which I'm sure anyone into expressions would appreciate. That's really how we learned, to combine data and the creative together.
Yeah. And now we're in this new era of, Chat GPT, being able to help even with the expression code. I don't know if you've heard of Hyperbrew's Chat GPT plugin for AE. It's pretty cool. You can ask it to come up with expressions right inside of a panel inside of AE. It's pretty nice. So check that out.
Falling behind.
Yeah, I just wanted to plug them. They're great Hyperbrew. Okay, so you've doing that kind of work is definitely kind of a new division of labor, right? Like dealing with data all of a sudden became a thing, like it's a task. But what about, the approach? You mentioned this idea that you had to have an easy way to build these rigs, to build the actual creative. And I guess, can you talk a little bit about the approach and what you observed at the earliest stages of, your team getting Templator into their environment, and how it kind of fit in? Was it a smooth process? Was it difficult? Was it enjoyable? Or was it, can you discuss a little bit about, I guess, how, somebody who goes to a design school or an art school, and all of a sudden they see something like this data-driven stuff, is it fun for them, I guess, in your experience?
Essentially any campaign starts with the data points, and I'm kind of chuckling because, almost anything you can conceptualize in Illustrator can be made into dynamic media in AE. So a lot of the time I would, get a storyboard from my creative director, and I'd be like, okay, I guess I'll figure it out. So we had to kind of unpack that and build that workflow, but it's all possible, and it's been quite exciting. So in that example of the bike race, we had a couple of data points like name, or what specific distance they were taking, what event they were taking part in, what their provisional time was. And that's when we were like, oh, but we can kind of work out what their average speed is. And, so that's, starts to change then, that's that kind of top right, the little speed cop, because this particular race, they close some roads, and the cyclists, cycle where the cars would have, on highways, and that's there was a moment of like, oh, what if we had a speed cop just kind of doing his job, and then he kind of gets overtaken by a bunch of cyclists. So you kind of have a lot of fun going, okay, well, we could package that moment as what a cyclist's average speed was. So there's a lot of fun you can have with that data narrative. And the creative team superpower is really building engaging pieces of animation around that data story, and bringing that to life is quite exciting.
Yeah, just in these examples here, it's beautiful stuff. And you've really got a way to combine the data very, very almost in an artistic, very artistically, as opposed to just something like a chart, right, or like a graph, like this one right here of the the speedometer. It's great. It's it's just a very fantastic way to integrate the data.
Yeah, but it kind of starts with the end in mind. It's like, what video would that user enjoy the most? And luckily for this particular example, Phil, the creative director, is a big cyclist, and that little moment of the cyclist putting a banana into his back pocket, it's such a big thing. Okay, you go for a long cycle, you take the banana so you don't cramp, and so many people like myself, not non-cyclists, didn't understand that. But you can see when this went out to social media, all of the cyclists were raving like, the banana, of course. So it's really that idea of like picking up on those small little moments. And traditionally, our bread and butter has been explainer videos. So those kind of like narrative moments are what we were doing anyway. But then you throw data into the mix, and it really makes things quite exciting. But if you've got a name that you have to animate into a scene, it could be 2 letters long or 20. So you really have to build those dynamic scenes with variables in mind. So that really changes things. As to like, how do you make these compositions look good? So templates kind of like layout sculpting tools really help. Auto-filling containers, auto-centering to comp, really what makes a super powerful for producing this kind of dynamic content. It's essentially the hard part is taken care of. You've got all of the layout tools just ready to go. So it's it's been quite fun to figure that out.
Yeah, and I mean, you get to, with AE, you get to take advantage of the mature graphics, technology that they have, and the motion blur, and it's fantastic. You can bring in what you already know. You can bring in even more advanced plugins from other vendors to the mix, and it's nice in that way. So stepping back from the actual production process, I want to talk a little bit about working with the clients a little bit more. What is the over the years, this kind of communication, this personalized video or hyper targeted video, it's becoming more familiar, at least to me, just because I'm part of the kind of ecosystem creating this tool that enables this. But as the years have gone by, have you noticed any more familiarity coming from the clients about what this kind of stuff is, or are you still having to go through the whole pitch of, hey, this thing is out there? Like, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's always a challenge. Even when you explain it, people don't get it. We usually try to quote like a piece of dynamic automated media that they might be familiar with. So a lot of the time we reference Spotify's Wrapped campaign. Oh, the music you listen to, did you get that video from them last year?
Okay.
It kind of, to really like solidify the data into the visual. But we'd say the greatest challenge is really jumping through the technical hoops. And because of the complicated nature of these projects, we're often dealing with multiple stakeholders. Okay, decision maker, internal creative, the data guys. So you've really got to get all those people onto the same page, which is quite tricky.
Right. But that does sound very painful, especially when there's a lot of stakeholders. But what about moving to
especially when all you want to do is you just want to kind of get into the creative and produce it. I mean, there was one particular case in the early days where we were still trying to gain traction with our dynamic content, and there was much confusion as to like what we were offering a particular bike race, similar to what we did for these guys, and they didn't really understand the concept of the unique data-driven video. With each person's race stats in, and eventually we said we just needed a portfolio piece. So eventually, we're like, hey, we'll do it for free, and we couldn't even give our services away for free in that particular case. They said no thanks. We're already giving every participant a pair of Fellskins, which is like a traditional leather boot type of shoe. So we don't need your videos. So we've worked really hard to package the value of these things, and sometimes no matter how creative you are, you're just not as good as a free pair of leather boots.
I mean, I think
but it's been a journey.
But there, I would say, just from understanding our end users, I would say that from my perspective, it seems like the clients out there are starting to understand it, like in a sense where they're like, okay, I get this thing is out there. They may not understand the details or even have a lot of examples, but I think it is there for them to, latch onto. Like, it's in the ether. I guess, what, after all of that struggle of dealing with all of that, the people, the data gathering, the actual render wrangling, which is in its own domain too, right? What is the outcome like? Like, what kind of feedback do your clients give you, though, after all is said and done and the consumer gets the actual content? Do you have any feedback in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably my favorite part
Sure.
it's all pretty positive. The general sentiment is excitement, especially to see what's possible with this type of data-driven media. And we find that once they've seen it, then they can start applying that concept to the projects that they have. But it's very much a seeing to believing kind of medium. So we've found, once you've done a project, then people really understand it. It's kind of after the fact they go, oh, I see what you did there. So it's very much a case of, and I suppose that's why we were doing these free gigs in the early days, is we just needed proof.
Proof
as to exactly, as to what we meant by it is still new, but it's a visual thing, and I think once they see it, they're like, okay,
the light bulb goes off, and they find they all of a sudden like, oh, I can connect to my customer, or I could connect to the donor, or I can connect to this person in a new way,
and that's it. It's a data problem of going, okay, well, how are you communicating your data? And this is a visual way to do that, which is exciting.
And I guess along the lines of the struggle to get these productions done, I mean, what do the clients get a little shocked at costs involved? Like, what are it's not, I personally know a lot of the costs that are involved just because I'm part of the tool making deal, but what about the clients? Like, tell me about, are they shocked to hear the types of budgets? I'm not asking for an actual number, but are they okay with it? Or is it a lot of convincing about the value with regards to the cost?
I think it depends. I mean, we've had some where it was more about the making a splash, and then it was seen of as an ad campaign, and then money wasn't an issue. And then other times there's really a lot of convincing that has to go into unpacking, like look at what the end product's going to be. Essentially you're running After Effects, means CPU usage is your raw material. In any kind of scale scenario. So whether we use cloud machines or local machines, the bulk of the cost really comes down to computing power to kind of produce this kind of media at scale. And it's a tricky one to standardize costs because there's so many variables. So often people are like, well, what does it cost? And well, then you go, okay, this is going to get boring. How many pieces of media? How complex are they? How long are they? What is the turnaround time? And so often people be like, oh no, it'll just be a 45-second video, and then it comes out 2.5 minutes later, and you go, the render costs are 100% in two different ballparks. So these factors all kind of affect the costs. So we don't have standard pricing there. We kind of have to spec out each cost and quote accordingly. But basically the costing is split into that upfront creative, like actually creating the artwork and the motion for a 1 to 2 minute video, the regular studio stuff, and then the automation, which would be running those kind of cloud renders at scale. But a lot of it comes down to like, can you package the value that a video experience would give somebody, if people understand what you're trying to do, then the kind of money side of things solves itself.
For sure. I mean, I think a lot of it is dependent on the art and the quality, I think, of how intensely you want After Effects to work, right? Like if you're talking about doing any kind of camera tracking and corner pin tracking, and you want to get dynamic media on those corner pins, like it's a lot of calculation. So it really does depend on the ratio also of how many frames are dynamic versus how many are not dynamic, that kind of thing.
Not every render second is created equal.
Right. That's a beautiful quote, Lloyd. Thank you for letting us capture that on this podcast. And so I guess, I think based on your experience here, I want to wrap it up. I'm just curious about, where you think this kind of thing is headed. What are we going to see in the future? How does maybe AI play into it? Just curious about your thoughts there.
It's such an exciting field, and I'm really enjoying that merge of data and tech. I think it's if it's the two things that I'm most excited about. So to be able to put them together is quite exciting for me personally. But I mean, if you look at the growing popularity of something like the Spotify Wrapped campaign, the potential is just amazing. It's definitely becoming more mainstream, and as great as the end products are, these projects are are much more complicated than a traditional campaign. So there'll still be some development around all those areas to kind of get these to be more mainstream, and certainly your suite of Dataclay tools does approach all of those issues, and the introduction of products like Q goes some way to addressing those complexities of scale.
Right.
But it's I suppose the idea of if innovation is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, then it's also exciting that the perspiration part can mostly be automated, and there's really I suppose there's no limit when you start to think about what's possible pairing it with AI. We haven't tinkered around with any of that yet, but whether it's generating copy or whether it's I'm sure generative AI visually is going to catch up to things on the video side. I've kind of got to keep half an eye on that. But it's really, and I think what we've seen with just the way data has changed our creative, I think AI will do the same. And it's going to force us all to look at the creative process differently, and in the same way that data has now changed the way we're producing media. AI will do the same, and it gets more exciting, which is awesome.
Definitely. Yeah. There's some really cool stuff coming out in the AI world. And we here at Dataclay are trying our best to figure out how we're going to integrate it. And we do have a mission to integrate it. It's just, we want to do it the right way. But
as if you don't have enough on your plate already.
Yeah. It's
hey,
always,
add to that.
Hey, it's Alan here. And I just wanted to jump in.
Sure,
I wanted to, while y'all were talking about AI, you had mentioned earlier in the podcast, the Hyperbrew plugin. I wanted to, we did have a question about the name of that plugin. I just wanted to provide that. It's Klutz GPT. Yes. It's got one of the greatest little taglines. It's the most unreliable way to write expressions and scripts for After Effects.
Yes.
So yeah, he's being facetious in that, but it is a lot of truth in the fact that right now generating scripts from ChatGPT is never a for certain thing, but it is extremely helpful, and so people are really enjoying it. But he has to give the caveat that it's not necessarily going to produce 100% reliable results, but It's amazing. And I do want to say that on our social channel on LinkedIn, if you go through our posts, we have a recent post. One of our customers wrote into support and sent us their entire ChatGPT thread that they gave us permission to post on our LinkedIn channel. And it was an example of them. Actually, I think it was they were trying to work with time code with Templater, which we aren't supporting out of the box. But they were able to write a script that did what they needed to do, and they had never written scripts before, and they did it all through ChatGPT. I don't think that they used the ChatGPT plugin for that, but it's a great example.
Yeah. So one of the nice things about Templater is that it's open enough, and I think Lloyd, you've even used this. It's open enough that where it's got hooks where you can develop your own script and hook into that algorithm, that repetitive reversioning algorithm. And this one customer had a need for a specific, thing that had to happen, and they used the AI to help them develop that script. And I think we'll see more of that, I think, as AI develops, but it's really, I think, a fascinating time for the kind of symbiotic nature of humans and tech, right? And I think when I, you know, when I see end users figure out how to bring data into their dynamic templates, it's really it's a really fantastic moment, because I think that was the goal of the at least templater tool at the outset was, you know, there are people that ride this fence between data and creative, and that's kind of our target market, and in terms of the tooling. So so yeah,
And I mean,
yeah,
very much you know, going back to what I was saying about Illustrator, and you know, then I was kind of presented with a storyboard, and then you go, okay, make it work. And so often it was pouring over, you know, 20, 30 tabs of Stack Overflow, and you're kind of flicking between, trying to find that hybrid. So, you know, I'm sure that the AI gives you that more customized response. But, you know, this particular scenario here, and that COVID tracker that we did as well, the kind of the graphing was so unique. It really needed some custom expressions and stuff, and you know, template took care of the layouts beautifully, but there was so much that was, you know, because of the dynamic content, you really have to push what's possible.
Yeah, and you know, I think we've even seen some really fantastic tools come in to not supplant the templator's like internal layout logic engine, but you know, we opened it up so that you could have something like you know, Mammo World has something called pins and boxes, and there's also this tool called Flex, and it really does a good job of laying things out using expressions. So you can use expressions to do the layout work now, and turn off templator's logic engine to stop that, so that, you know, you can take, you know, you can use other other developers methodologies for automatically doing responsive design, you know, for the graphics.
That makes your job more difficult. You know, not only are we using, you know, different tools to try and get what data-driven creative, you know, you're having to account for all of that. But you know, and we kind of really appreciate the way that you've walked that journey with us. I still remember in the early days, I kind of came to you and I was like, look, I'm getting really frustrated because I'm using this Google Sheet and I'm having to add sets of columns every time. And every time I get a new project, look, I've got bots that's looking at this Google Sheet, and you know, how do I keep up? I think I'm going to run out of columns in Google Sheet. And you were like, well, you know, you need a database. And I was like, well, what's a database? So I appreciate your patience. You know, you've really leveled us up as far as what we can do. And it's been a long journey, but and those possibilities just keep expanding. So thank you for kind of sticking with us. You know, those insights you mentioned.
Lloyd, you made a statement earlier on that was really profound, and that was that not every render is equal. And you know, when I think about the AI, and I was just listening to a video about Adobe's Firefly generative AI technology, and I don't know how many, you know, of our listeners are going to know, our viewers are going to know, but they are you know, in November they're going to be charging for Firefly, and it's going to be, you know, you're going to be allocated a certain amount of credits depending on the membership you have. So truly, you know, obviously AI is something that can be worked into especially with our Q offering and its API. You could easily automate using AI services, but they come at a price, and you truly, every render will not be equal. And if you dig down into Firefly, even the different services they offer will charge differently. And it's all in flux. So very much in the spirit of how you were describing, you know, workflows now, even without AI, it's going to be even more to price these things.
But I think, I mean, less about the pricing and more about, you know, how you were saying about daisy chaining products together. And I think templater specifically is quite beautifully situated, at that intersection of data and tech and creative. And I suppose the same way how we were using Zapier in the earlier days, just to kind of figure out how do we put all these unique things together. I think we're going to start seeing some studios and production houses come out with incredible campaigns, because they're thinking about, hey, what if I take this AI thing and this tool and, kind of put stuff together. So, that's what excites me about the field that we're in is it's not just defined of, okay, we're a motion studio. It's really about, we're tinkerers, and we kind of have an internal joke about pioneering, and we kind of look at each other before we start a project and go, oh, are we pioneering again? But I think that's what keeps things fresh is really looking at different tools and different techs and kind of figuring out how they fit together. I suppose that's another layer of the creative process on top of the actual piece of media.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so I think I don't want to take too much of your time up, but I do want to thank you again for coming on. We've seen a few comments come in, mentioned your graphics are awesome, your animation is awesome, and I think that y'all should keep on doing what y'all do, and it is exciting to see what new things you all come up with, and we're always excited to give you new ways to empower your studio. So thank you for using our software.
Keep the toys coming.
Yeah, definitely.
We'll take them all.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. All right. Well, thanks again, and we will be in touch. And thanks everybody for joining us. And until our next episode. So thanks. Take care, guys.
Thanks, Ari.
Yeah, you're welcome.